Hi, I'm Derek Thompson. I'm a software engineer living in Seattle working for a tech startup that most people have never heard of, but pays me well enough to afford a decent apartment in Capitol Hill. I've got a routine: coffee at 6 a.m., gym at 7, work by 9, home by 6, Netflix and takeout until bed. It's a good life, quiet and predictable. But this morning, my phone shattered. That piece with 39 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I stared at the screen, my coffee getting cold in my hand. 39 calls. Who calls someone 39 times? The voicemails were stacking up like a digital avalanche. My first instinct was spam. Maybe some scammer had gotten hold of my number. But something felt different. These weren't robocalls. These were real people. Real desperation bleeding through the digital static. I hesitated before hitting play on the first voicemail. The voice that came through made my blood freeze. Derek? Derek, is this you? This is Mom. Derek Thompson, born March 15th, 1996, in Phoenix? Please call back. We need to talk to you. It's about Grandma Rose. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the hardwood floor. Mom. A word I hadn't heard directed at me in 20 years. A word that tasted like ash and abandonment. You want to know what I'd do if parents who abandoned me suddenly called after 2 decades like nothing happened? Well, I'm about to find out. Because 20 years ago, they left me at a gas station as a joke. They drove away laughing, shouting, "Let's see how long it takes him to get home." Through the car window. I never went back. And now somehow, they'd found me. The second voicemail was my father's voice, deeper now, weathered by time but unmistakable. Son, I know this is complicated, but we really need to talk. There's been a death in the family and there are legal matters that require your attention. Please, just call us back. Legal matters, of course. After 20 years of silence, they weren't calling because they missed me or wondered how I'd survived. They needed something. I sat on my couch staring at my phone like it was a bomb. The other voicemails could wait. First, I needed to remember. I needed to go back to that day that split my life into before and after. I was 8 years old, summer of 2004. We were driving from Phoenix to Denver for my cousin's wedding, Dad's side of the family. It was supposed to be a bonding trip, just the 3 of us. Mom had packed sandwiches and bought me a new Pokemon backpack with Pikachu on the front. I was so proud of that backpack, stuffed with my Game Boy, some comics, and a few Pokemon cards I'd been saving. The Shell station sat like a bright oasis on the endless stretch of New Mexico highway between Albuquerque and Santa Fe. Dad pulled up to pump number 3, the one right in front of the convenience store windows. The desert heat hit us like a wall when we stepped out of the air-conditioned car. "Derek, buddy," Dad said, ruffling my hair in that way that always made me feel special. "Run inside and grab some snacks for the road. Get whatever you want. We've got a long drive ahead." He handed me a $5 bill, crisp and new. I felt so grown up, so trusted. "Can I get Skittles?" "Get 2 packs," Mom laughed, adjusting her sunglasses. "One for now, one for later." I bounced into the store, my Pokemon backpack swinging behind me. The cashier was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and kind eyes. Her name tag read, Carol. "Well, aren't you just full of energy?" Carol smiled. "Family road trip?" "Yeah, we're going to my cousin's wedding in Denver. Dad says I can be the ring bearer if I practice walking straight." I wandered the aisles, carefully selecting our supplies. 2 packs of Skittles, some beef jerky for Dad, Diet Coke for Mom, and a package of those frosted cookies that looked too good to resist. Carol rang me up, making conversation about Pokemon and asking if I'd caught them all yet. "Your parents seem nice, Perce," she said, glancing out the window. "They're... oh." I turned to look. The parking space where our blue Honda Civic had been sitting was empty. I blinked, confused. Maybe they'd moved to a different pump. "Where did they go?" I asked Carol, pressing my face to the glass. Carol's expression shifted from casual friendliness to concern. She stepped outside with me, scanning the parking lot. No blue Honda, no parents. Just empty asphalt shimmering in the desert heat. "Maybe they went around back," Carol suggested, but her voice carried doubt. We walked around the building. Nothing. Carol's concern deepened into worry. "Sweetie, When did you last see them? Just now. They were right there at pump 3. Dad was putting gas in the car. But as I replayed the memory, a horrible detail emerged. Dad hadn't been pumping gas when I walked into the store. He'd been standing by the car talking to Mom, and the gas cap had already been closed. They said they'd wait for me, I whispered, my 8-year-old brain struggling to process what was happening. Carol knelt down to my eye level. What's your parents' names, honey? Robert and Linda Thompson. But everyone calls them Bob and Lynn. And what's your name? Derek Michael Thompson. I'm 8 years old, and I live at 1247 Cactus Road in Phoenix, Arizona. Carol's face hardened with a resolution I didn't understand at the time. She stood up and walked back into the store, motioning for me to follow. We're going to call them, okay? They probably just went to get something from down the road. But when she dialed our home number, it went straight to the answering machine. Dad's cheerful voice, "You've reached the Thompson family. We can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and we'll get right back to you. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, this is Carol at the Shell station on Highway 285. Your son Derek is here and we can't find you. Please call back immediately at..." She left the store number and hung up. An hour passed, then 2. Carol kept calling, leaving increasingly urgent messages. Other customers came and went, some asking if I was okay, if I was lost. Carol explained the situation in hushed tones while I sat on a plastic chair behind the counter, clutching my backpack and the bag of snacks I'd bought for a family that was no longer there. At the 3-hour mark, Carol made the call that would change my life forever. Yes, I need to report a possible child abandonment. I have an 8-year-old boy whose parents left him at my gas station. The words hit me like physical blows. Abandonment. Left. The concepts were too big, too impossible for my child brain to fully grasp. Parents didn't just leave their children. That wasn't how families worked. There had to be an explanation. Carol sat with me while we waited for the police, occasionally trying our home number again. She bought me a Coke and let me pick out a candy bar, refusing my offer to pay with the crumpled $5 bill. "This isn't your fault, sweetie," she kept saying. "Sometimes adults make very bad decisions." When the police arrived, Officer Martinez, a kind woman with gentle eyes, they tried calling my parents too, still nothing. Officer Martinez asked me careful questions about whether my parents had been fighting, whether they'd seemed upset, whether they'd ever left me places before. "No," I insisted. "They love me. Dad calls me his buddy. Mom makes me Mickey Mouse pancakes on Sundays. They wouldn't just leave me." But even as I said it, doubt crept in. Because I remembered now with horrible clarity what I'd seen as I walked into the store. Dad and Mom hadn't been standing casually by the car. They'd been looking at me through the window, and Dad had been smiling in a way that hadn't seemed quite right. And just before I reached the door, I'd heard him say something to Mom that made her laugh. What had he said? The memory was fuzzy, but as I sat in the back of Officer Martinez's patrol car 4 hours later, it came back with devastating clarity. "Let's see how long it takes him to get home." They'd planned it. The whole thing had been deliberate. The gas station, the snacks, the $5 bill. It had all been an elaborate setup for what they probably thought was a hilarious prank. Leave the kid, drive away, see what happens. Maybe they'd planned to come back in an hour or two, laughing about how scared I'd been. Maybe they'd expected me to cry and panic and make it even funnier. But 4 hours had passed and they still weren't back. Either their joke had gone too far or they'd never intended to come back at all. The foster system became my new reality with shocking speed. Officer Martinez drove me to a temporary placement, a house that smelled like pine sol and had toys scattered everywhere. Mrs. Garcia spoke softly and gave me mac and cheese from a box, but her eyes held that particular sadness that adults get when they have to explain that the world is crueler than children think it should be. "Your parents haven't called back yet," she told me gently, "but I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding." From Mrs. Garcia's house, I called home every few hours. Finally, on the second day, Mom answered. "Derek, oh my God, honey, where are you?" "Mom!" The relief flooding through me was so intense I started crying. "I'm in Albuquerque with a lady named Mrs. Garcia. You left me at the gas station and I couldn't find you." There was a pause. A long pause that should have been filled with apologies and explanations and promises to come get me immediately. Derek, sweetie, you're being dramatic. We didn't leave you. We went to get gas at the station across the street, and when we came back, you weren't there. We thought you'd wandered off. But I was inside buying snacks like you told me to. Carol saw you drive away. Who's Carol? The lady who works there. She called you a bunch of times. Another pause. Honey, we never got any calls. Our phone must have been having problems, but listen, you're being very dramatic about this whole thing. It was just a misunderstanding. Dramatic. At 8 years old, I didn't fully understand what gaslighting was, but I knew the feeling. The way reality seemed to shift under my feet. The way my own memory became unreliable in the face of their certainty. When are you coming to get me? I asked. Well, we're already in Denver for the wedding. It's very complicated to drive all the way back to New Mexico right now, but don't worry. The authorities will figure out how to get you home. Home. The word sounded strange in her mouth, like she was talking about someone else's home. Over the next 3 months, I lived with Mrs. Garcia while social workers made phone calls and filed paperwork and tried to facilitate what they called family reunification. Every conversation with my parents followed the same pattern. They were sorry for the misunderstanding. They loved me. But there were always complications, work obligations, financial constraints, legal hurdles they were trying to navigate. Derek's being very sensitive about this whole thing, Mom told the social worker during one of their phone conferences. I was in the next room, but voices carry. He doesn't understand that sometimes families get separated accidentally. We've been trying very hard to work with the system, but there's so much red tape. Dad's voice was equally reasonable, equally concerned. We just want our son back, but we want to make sure we do everything properly. Derek has always been a bit dramatic. He takes things very personally. We don't want to traumatize him further by rushing the process. Dramatic, sensitive, taking things personally. The words became a refrain, a way of explaining away my pain and confusion. 8-year-old me began to wonder if maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I had misunderstood what happened at the gas station. Maybe I was being difficult. But late at night, lying in Mrs. Garcia's spare bed with my Pokemon backpack clutched against my chest, I remembered Dad's voice clearly. Let's see how long it takes him to get home. And Mom's laugh. Those weren't the sounds of parents who'd accidentally lost their child. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in October. I'd been with Mrs. Garcia for almost 3 months, attending a new school and slowly adjusting to the reality that this temporary situation was becoming less temporary by the day. The social worker, Ms. Chen, had arranged another phone call with my parents to discuss the next steps in reunification. I sat in Ms. Chen's office, my legs swinging from the adult-sized chair while she dialed the number. Mom answered on the third ring. Linda, it's Ms. Chen from Child Protective Services. I have Derek here with me, and we need to discuss the reunification timeline. Oh, Mom's voice sounded different, distracted. Actually, Ms. Chen, Bob and I have been talking, and we think maybe Derek is better off where he is for now. The words hit me like ice water. Better off where he is. I'm sorry? Ms. Chen's professional composure cracked slightly. Well, he seems to be adjusting well to his new situation. And honestly, this whole experience has been very traumatic for our family too. Maybe some time apart would be good for everyone. Ms. Chen looked at me, her eyes full of an anger she was trying hard to contain. Mrs. Thompson, are you saying you don't want to pursue reunification with your son? We're saying we want to do what's best for Derek. And right now, that might be staying in the system until everyone has had time to heal from this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Heal. The therapeutic language couldn't disguise what was happening. They were giving up on me. No, they were choosing to give up on me. Derek is 8 years old, Ms. Chen said carefully. He needs his parents. Derek is a very resilient child. Dad's voice joined the conversation. And frankly, he's been happier in foster care than he ever was at home. Maybe that's telling us something. I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that I missed them every day, that I'd been good and patient and understanding because I thought they were coming back for me. Instead, I slipped out of my chair and walked to the window, pressing my face against the cool glass. The conversation continued behind me, full of legal terms and procedural requirements. But the essential truth was already clear. My parents were walking away, officially, legally, permanently. That night, Mrs. Garcia found me in my room, sitting on the floor with my Pokemon backpack open in front of me. I'd emptied it completely. The Game Boy with dead batteries, the comics with bent covers, the Pokemon cards that no longer seemed important. At the very bottom was the family photo from our last vacation, the $5 bill Dad had given me, and the receipt from the gas station candy I'd never eaten. "What are you doing, mijo?" Mrs. Garcia asked softly. "Deciding what to keep," I said. I threw away the games and comics. The Pokemon cards went to another foster kid who might enjoy them, but the photo, the $5 bill, and the receipt went back into the backpack's front pocket. Evidence. Proof that it had really happened, that I hadn't imagined or dramatized or misunderstood. Mrs. Garcia sat down beside me on the floor. "You know this isn't your fault, right? What happened to you, what your parents did. None of that was because of anything you did wrong." They said I was being dramatic. Adults sometimes say things that aren't true when they're trying to make themselves feel better about bad choices. Will they change their minds? Mrs. Garcia was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, Derek. But I do know that whether they do or don't, you're going to be okay. There are people who will love you and take care of you, even if those people aren't the ones who should have." 3 weeks later, I was placed with my second foster family. Then my third. Then my fourth. Each transition required packing that Pokemon backpack, carrying my small collection of proof from one temporary home to another. Some families were kind, some were indifferent, some were actively harmful. But through it all, the backpack remained constant. A bright yellow reminder of the day my childhood ended and my real education began. The lesson wasn't complicated. Family wasn't about blood or biology or the people who happened to create you. Family was about who stayed, who chose you every day, even when things got difficult, who didn't drive away laughing while you stood in a gas station, clutching snacks you'd bought for people who had already decided you were disposable. By the time I was 11, I'd stopped hoping they'd call. By the time I was 13, I'd stopped thinking about them every day. By 15, I'd learned to introduce myself without mentioning parents at all. And by 18, when I aged out of the system with a full scholarship to college and the fierce determination of someone who'd raised himself, I'd become someone they wouldn't recognize even if they passed me on the street. Someone named Derek Thompson, who carried a Pokemon backpack full of evidence that some jokes aren't funny at all. But life has a way of surprising you, even when you think you've written the final chapter. At 18, when I was preparing to leave my final foster home for MIT, something extraordinary happened. Martha and Jim Rodriguez weren't supposed to be permanent. I was technically too old for adoption, and they'd only agreed to provide temporary housing for my senior year of high school. But on graduation day, as I walked across that stage with no family in the audience, I spotted them in the third row, holding a homemade sign that read, "Congratulations, Derek," in Martha's careful handwriting. After the ceremony, they found me in the parking lot, standing alone while other graduates hugged parents and grandparents. "Derek," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion, "Jim and I have been talking." I braced myself for another goodbye. In 10 years of foster care, I'd learned that "we've been talking" usually meant "we've decided this isn't working out." "We know you're 18 now and legally you're an adult," Jim continued, "but we were wondering if you'd like to make this official. We'd like to adopt you." I stared at them, these two people who'd given me stability for exactly 8 months, longer than any placement since Mrs. Garcia. Martha was a retired teacher with graying hair and laugh lines. Jim worked construction and had taught me how to change a tire and balance a checkbook. They weren't wealthy or particularly remarkable, but they'd done something no one else had. They'd stayed. Why? I asked, because foster care teaches you to question good things. "Because you're our son," Martha said simply. "Not because we gave birth to you, but because we choose you. Every day." The adoption was finalized 3 days before I left for college. At 19, I officially became Derek Douglas Thompson, taking Jim's middle name because, as Martha said, family names should mean something. For the first time since that gas station, I had people who claimed me intentionally. College was a revelation. MIT's computer science program was demanding, but I thrived under pressure. Foster care had taught me that survival required excellence. I graduated summa cum laude, landed a job at a startup in Seattle, and methodically built the quiet life I'd always craved. I dated occasionally, but never seriously. I made friends, but kept them at arm's length. And I maintained exactly zero presence on social media. Derek Douglas Thompson existed only in employment records, tax filings, and the occasional Christmas card from Martha and Jim. I thought I was invisible. I thought I was safe. For 20 years, that strategy worked perfectly. I rose through the ranks at 3 different tech companies, bought a condo, learned to cook, traveled to countries where no one knew my history. I sent Martha and Jim money when Jim's construction accident left them struggling with medical bills. I built a life that was entirely mine, free from the chaos and cruelty that had defined my childhood. But as I sat in my Seattle apartment, staring at 39 missed calls, I realized that invisibility is an illusion. Blood leaves a trail that determined people can follow, no matter how carefully you try to disappear. I spent the morning researching. It's amazing what you can find online when you know how to look. Public records, obituaries, property transfers, the digital breadcrumbs of other people's lives. What I found made my stomach turn. Grandma Rose, my mother's mother, had died 6 weeks ago. The obituary in the Phoenix, Arizona Republic was brief. Rose Marie Patterson, beloved mother and grandmother, passed peacefully at age 84, survived by daughter Linda Thompson and grandson Derek Thompson, location unknown. Location unknown. They'd listed me in her obituary without knowing where I was or whether I was even alive. But the real revelation came when I dug deeper into probate records. Grandma Rose, the woman who'd sent me $5 birthday cards until I was 10, and then stopped when my parents told her I was too troubled to handle family contact, had left an estate worth $847,000. Most of it was from the sale of her house in Scottsdale, a property that had appreciated dramatically over the past 2 decades. And according to her will, filed with the Maricopa County Superior Court, the entire estate was to be divided equally among all living grandchildren. I was the only living grandchild. My parents, who had voluntarily surrendered their parental rights when I was 11 and told social services they wanted no further contact, were now my only legal connection to an inheritance worth nearly $1 million. Without my signature on the probate documents, they couldn't touch a penny of it. The irony was so bitter, I actually laughed out loud. The child they'd abandoned as a joke, the son they'd dismissed as too dramatic, the boy they'd erased from their lives was now the key to their financial salvation. I called in sick to work and spent the rest of the day making phone calls of my own. First, to a probate attorney in Phoenix who confirmed what I'd suspected. As the sole heir, I had complete control over the inheritance. My biological parents had no legal claim to Grandma Rose's money, unless I chose to share it. It's actually quite straightforward, the lawyer explained. The will is clear, and there are no other claimants. You'll need to appear in Phoenix to finalize the paperwork, but the estate is yours. My second call was more difficult. I looked up the Shell station on Highway 285, the one that had been the last place I'd felt safe with my original family. Miraculously, it was still there, still operating under the same franchise. Shell station, this is Carol. My heart nearly stopped. Carol? Carol, who was working there in 2004? That's me. Been here 23 years come December. Who's asking? This is Derek Thompson. I don't know if you remember me, but... Derek! Her voice exploded with recognition and joy. Oh my God, Derek! The little boy with the Pokemon backpack? I've wondered about you for 20 years. How are you? Are you okay? Tears I didn't expect started flowing. I'm okay, Carol. I'm actually really okay. But I need to ask you something important. Do you remember that day? Every detail, she said grimly. I've got the incident report I filed with corporate, the security footage I saved, and the police report number memorized. That wasn't no misunderstanding, honey. I watched your parents drive away while you were inside shopping. I saw them looking back at the store and laughing. Would you be willing to testify to that? In court? Against your parents? Absolutely. That evening, I made the call I'd been avoiding all day. I dialed the number from the 39th voicemail, the one where Dad had left his contact information for legal purposes. He answered on the first ring. Derek, son, we've been trying to reach you for days. I know, 39 times. We were so worried when we couldn't find you. We hired a private investigator, spent thousands of dollars tracking you down. We never stopped looking for you, son. The lies came so easily, so smoothly that I almost admired their skill. If I hadn't spent 20 years learning to recognize manipulation, I might have believed them. What do you want, Bob? Bob? Derek, I'm your father. And we want to see you, of course. We want to reconnect, to make up for lost time. Lost time, I repeated. Interesting way to phrase abandoning your child. A pause. Then Mom's voice joined the call. Speakerphone, I realized. They'd planned this conversation, probably rehearsed it. Derek, honey, you sound so angry. We understand why you might be upset about what happened, but it was a long time ago. You were just a child, and you might not remember everything clearly. There it was, the gaslighting, as predictable as sunrise. Make me doubt my own memory, my own experience. I remember perfectly. You left me at a gas station and drove away. You told social services you didn't want me back. You terminated your parental rights. That's a very dramatic interpretation of what happened, Dad said. The truth is more complicated. There were misunderstandings, legal issues we couldn't navigate, a system that made it almost impossible for us to bring you home. Where's home, Bob? What's my address growing up? Silence. They didn't remember. Of course they didn't remember. Derek, Mom said carefully, we know there's been hurt on all sides, but we're family, and family finds a way to heal. Speaking of family, I said, letting my voice go cold, I heard about Grandma Rose. My condolences on your loss. Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear them recalibrating. Yes, Dad said slowly. It's been very difficult. She always asked about you, you know. Always wondered what happened to her grandson. Did she? That's interesting, because she stopped sending birthday cards when I was 10, right around the time you told her I was too troubled for family contact. The silence stretched so long I thought they might have hung up. Derek, Mom finally said, there are some legal matters related to Rose's passing that require your attention. And there it was. The truth finally surfaced. You mean the $847,000 inheritance that I'm the sole heir to? You know about that? Dad's carefully modulated tone cracked slightly. I know about all of it. The will, the probate process, the fact that you need my signature to access any of Grandma Rose's money. I also know that you've been calling me family for the first time in 20 years because suddenly I'm worth something to you. You know what? That's not fair, Mom said. We've always loved you. We've been trying to find you for years. Have you? Because I've been Derek Douglas Thompson for over a decade. It's a matter of public record. If you'd hired that private investigator any time in the past 10 years instead of just the past 6 weeks, you could have found me easily. I let that sink in before continuing. But you didn't look until Grandma Rose died and left me money you want. You didn't care where I was when I graduated valedictorian from high school. You didn't care when I got a full scholarship to MIT. You didn't care when I graduated summa cum laude, or got my first job, or bought my first home. You only cared when I became financially useful. Derek, please, Mom started. I'm not finished. I've been recording this call, by the way. I hope you don't mind, but after 20 years of being told I misremembered or dramatized my own abandonment, I've learned to document things. The sharp intake of breath told me they minded very much. I talked to Carol today. Remember Carol? The gas station clerk who watched you drive away while I was inside buying snacks for a family road trip that turned out to be my abandonment? She still works there. She still has the security footage. She still remembers your license plate number and the exact time you left me there. Derek. Dad tried to interrupt. She also remembers you looking back at the store and laughing. Both of you. Because leaving your 8-year-old son at a gas station in the desert was hilarious to you. We thought it was harmless, Mom whispered. Finally, an admission. We thought you'd figure it out, that you'd ask Carol to call us, I don't know, we thought it would be funny. A story we'd laugh about later. You thought abandoning a child would be a funny story? We were young, Dad said desperately. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we've regretted it every day since. Have you? Because when social services called to arrange family reunification, you told them I was better off in foster care. When they asked if you wanted to maintain contact, you said no. When they offered you parenting classes and counseling to help bring me home, you declined. We were scared, Mom said. We didn't know how to fix what we'd done. So you did nothing. For 20 years, you did nothing. Until 6 weeks ago when I became worth $847,000 to you. I took a deep breath, centering myself for what came next. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to Phoenix next week to finalize the inheritance. I'm going to take every penny of Grandma Rose's money because legally and morally, it's mine. I'm going to donate $400,000 of it to organizations that support foster children and family reunification services, the kind of services you refused when I needed them. Derek, please, just listen. I'm going to keep $400,000 for myself and my real family, Martha and Jim Rodriguez, who adopted me when I was 18 and taught me what family actually means. People who choose you and keep choosing you, even when it's difficult. We're your real family, Mom cried. No, you're not. You're the people who created me and then discarded me when I became inconvenient. There's a difference. The remaining $47,000, I continued, I'm giving to Carol, the gas station clerk who called police when you abandoned me, who stayed with me for 4 hours, who saved my life that day. She showed me more love and protection in 4 hours than you showed me in 8 years. You can't do this, Dad said, desperation making his voice ugly. We're your parents. We have rights. No, you don't. You voluntarily terminated your parental rights in 2005. You have no legal claim to me or anything that belongs to me. You made sure of that. We'll contest the will. We'll sue you. With what money? With what legal standing? I've already spoken to an attorney. You have no case. But please, try to sue me. I'd love to see you explain to a judge why you abandoned your child as a joke and then waited 20 years to contact him again. Coincidentally, right after he inherited nearly $1 million. The silence on the other end was complete. I want you to understand something, I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. This isn't revenge. Revenge would be making you suffer the way you made me suffer. This is justice. This is natural consequences. You taught me that family is a choice, not an obligation. You taught me that when people show you who they are, you should believe them. Derek, please, Mom whispered. We're begging you. We need this money. We have debts, medical bills. Then you should have thought of that before you drove away from a gas station, laughing at your 8-year-old son who was buying snacks for people who had already decided to abandon him. I hung up. For a long moment, I sat in my apartment, looking out at the Seattle skyline, feeling something I hadn't felt since I was 8 years old. Complete closure. The little boy who'd clutched his Pokemon backpack in a gas station parking lot, wondering what he'd done wrong, finally had his answer. He'd done nothing wrong. He just had the misfortune of being born to people who confused cruelty with humor and abandonment with tough love. A week later, I flew to Phoenix. The probate court proceedings were straightforward. I signed the papers, provided identification, and officially became $847,000 richer. But the money wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the drive I took afterward, back to that Shell station on Highway 285. It looked exactly the same, sun-bleached and defiant against the desert landscape. Pump number 3 was still there, still functioning. Carol was working the afternoon shift just as she had 20 years ago. When I walked through the door, she looked up and immediately broke into tears. Derek, oh, honey, look at you. You're all grown up. I pulled out my old Pokemon backpack. I'd brought it with me from Seattle and set it on the counter. Carol's eyes widened. You still have it. I kept everything. The photo, the $5 bill Dad gave me, even the receipt from the snacks I bought that day. I kept things too, Carol said softly. She disappeared into the back office and returned with a manila folder. Security footage, incident reports, police report numbers. I always thought someday you might need them. I opened the folder. There it was. 20 years of evidence that my memory was accurate, that I hadn't been dramatic or oversensitive, that what happened to me was real and documented and wrong. Carol, I need to tell you something. My grandmother died and left me some money. A lot of money. Oh, sweetie, I'm sorry for your loss. I want to give you $50,000 of it. Carol stared at me. What? You saved my life that day. You called the police when you could have just assumed my parents would come back. You stayed with me, bought me a Coke, made me feel safe when my world was falling apart. You've kept evidence for 20 years in case I ever needed it. You're more family to me than the people who share my DNA. Derek, I can't take your money. Yes, you can. Please, let me do this one thing to thank you for doing the right thing when it mattered most. We sat there in that gas station, crying and laughing, while I wrote her a check. Then I walked outside to pump number 3, where a scared 8-year-old boy had once stood watching his parents drive away, and I took a photo with my phone. I sent the photo to Martha and Jim with a message. This is where my story began, but you two are where my family starts. Their response came immediately. Come home soon. We're making your favorite dinner, and Jim bought ice cream for dessert. We love you, son. Son. A word that meant something now because it came from people who'd earned the right to use it. I drove away from that gas station for the second time in my life, but this time I wasn't abandoned. This time I was choosing to leave, carrying with me the proof that some wounds can heal and some stories can have happy endings if you're patient enough to wait for the people who will choose you back. 3 months later, my biological parents tried to contact me one more time. A single text message from my mother. Derek, we're losing our house, please. I deleted it without responding and blocked their numbers. Some jokes stop being funny after 20 years. Some bridges once burned aren't worth rebuilding. Some family ties are better left severed. But some found families are worth more than all the biological connections in the world. And some 8-year-old boys grow up to be men who understand the difference between blood and love, between DNA and dedication, between the people who create you and the people who choose to keep you. I still have that Pokemon backpack. It sits in my closet in Seattle next to the photos from Martha and Jim's 30th anniversary party and the Christmas cards from my foster siblings who became my chosen brothers and sisters. Evidence of a life rebuilt from abandonment, proof that some stories have better second acts than first ones. My biological parents never got a penny of Grandma Rose's money, but I got something much more valuable. The absolute certainty that I am loved by people who chose me intentionally, consistently, and without reservation. People who would never drive away from a gas station while I stood inside, buying snacks for a family that was already gone,